Okay, good afternoon and welcome to the second of two webinars from Airmic based on corporate culture and how this can fit into the risk management framework of an organisation. I'm Georgina Oak, one of the research and development managers at Airmic. Today I decided to talk about culture because it's a key problem for risk managers despite its importance. Airmic members report that they have a failure to integrate risk management fully across their business and a lack of embedded risk culture. These are the top 3 risk governance concerns of Airmic members. So it's something that we know is key, but that our members are struggling with. We've teamed up with experts across the risk and insurance industries to assist members in developing a positive risk culture. In our first webinar of the 27th of April, we looked at lessons in the Airmic guide that addresses managing risk culture and why it's important. If you missed that webinar on the 27th of April, not a problem, as it's all online, both the slides and the audio, on airmic.com underneath our technical resource. Today, we're going to be looking at a risk tool that was developed by QBE and shared with Airmic members. Anybody who's a fully paid up member of Airmic can access this tool for free. Today, I'm joined by Deborah O'Riordan from QBE and Mark Butterworth of Condi Risk Consulting. They've developed the tool and they've been using it with a number of their clients to help them develop a more positive risk culture. So today, we're going to talk about some of the lessons and how our members can get involved. So, Debbie, why did QBE decide to focus on risk culture and why did you develop a tool?
Okay, yeah. I think if we rewind the clock several years, maybe 5 or 6 years, we were beginning to see through our sort of claims investigation and causation analysis that many of the contributory factors were more on the people risk side, so cultural factors. And this was despite businesses having very mature management systems in place, whether driven by regulation or their own desire to have those systems in place, and having policies, processes, all the handbooks, and lots of layers of inspection, audit, review, whatever, your 3 lines of defence or your 5 lines of assurance. But despite that, we were seeing claims and you think this shouldn't happen because you've got those systems in place. So obviously claims do happen and that's, otherwise our business model wouldn't work, would it? But claims that shouldn't happen given the systems are in place. So when you start to dig down and you start to analyse why did this happen, what were the contributory factors, you're very much looking at people and culture, and that's the position we got to. And although we developed lots of operational risk assessments for our clients, we didn't have anything that dealt with that sort of cultural side. So we wanted to demonstrate a sort of collaborative approach and build something to drive the risk management agenda on that was much more than just purely operational. That sort of decision making was supported by the fact that in 2015 QBE conducted a survey of 377 businesses across all sorts of industries and professions and trades, and only 3 out of 10 of them felt they had a positive risk culture embedded. We started already then to talk about, well, which are the tricky areas for you, and what would you need. And although there was lots of theory out there, I mean, you could drown in all the papers that are out there on risk culture at the moment, and they still flood in all the time. We didn't feel there was anything that was a practical solution to all of that. So you could do all this reading, but you're still no further on in terms of practical, where do we actually start to evaluate this? So that impetus had been building for several years, and then we finally launched the tool in November 2015, and that's where Airmic came in and sort of recognised the potential for its members.
Excellent, and yes, we certainly do recognise that potential for our members. Before we talk about how the sort of tool actually works and how members can get involved, can you sort of give me a little bit of context on, how have you divvied up the tool? What does it look like?
Yeah, okay. So we've got, and this is reflected, the tool and the guide are sort of mirrors. So we've got the 7 sections of risk culture, the drivers, the key drivers that we see. I mean, there'll be lots of other, like I say, all the theories, they're all just looking at it through a different lens. You'll have the same content basically, but maybe different headers and so on. But we decided on 7. and they are, as your circle there indicates, so we've got leadership and people, reward recognition, communications, service delivery and operations management, performance and service evaluation, and continuous improvement. Now, we'll hand over in a minute to go through those in a little bit more detail, but I would say, you know, your guide that you've produced has got lots of detail on all of these. So what we will do is give a flavour of them, but to get the sort of lowdown on all of the 7 areas, go to the guide.
Yes.
It's nice and detailed. It's got lots of little case studies and vignettes and so on in there, which will help people understand these and will help to illustrate what we're going to talk about in a minute. So the next few slides deal with those 7 sections individually, and I'm going to hand over to Mark here, who's a risk consultant and co-authored the tool with us, and he's going to talk through each of the 7 sections in a little bit more detail.
Okay, thanks Deborah. Yes, the 7 characteristics that you were just introduced to, each is actually divided into some sub-elements, and so if we look at leadership first of all, there are 4 particular views of risk leadership. And most people say that good risk culture is all about the tone from the top. You'll see that expression pretty often. But what the tool asks clients to do is to look at the risk ethos in the organization, how risk management is embedded in strategy and planning, whether there's a coherent risk appetite and tolerance framework, and how the management team actually demonstrate that they lead by example. Leadership is a very important feature of the tool. Then we go on to the wider aspects of people, training and development. And we look at, in the tool, of what resources the firm applies to risk management, and the culture in terms of no blame, or if you like, holding people to be accountable, but in a learning business environment. You can look at buying in, training, development support and evaluation, and so on. It's really important that the reward and recognition structure of the organization encourages good risk-taking, not risk avoidance at all times, and that the organization doesn't get into rewarding people for, let's say, sales targets that result in over-promising or mis-selling, or in fact poor client or customer experience. It's also appropriate at this time to think about performance reviews of employees, including the board. I mean, this applies to everybody in the organization when we think about the risk culture. Now, for this to work effectively, we ask clients, when using the tool, to take a view on the communication framework that you have, and that there is effective and broad stakeholder communications, that information on risk is broadly shared, good news and bad news if necessary, and that there's effective backup documentation that encapsulates the risk approach that the organization has, and that it can be communicated to new employees, new joiners, and so on. The 5th element of the tool is to do with operations, and this will be about ensuring that there's an effective control environment, that the operations are carried out safely, effectively, efficiently, that there's a good embedding of the corporate values into the core operations of the business, and really importantly that that supply chain management is carried out in a way that matches the risk culture of the organization. Service evaluation is really important. This is where the organization becomes honest with itself, if you will, that quality control measures are in place, that there are feedback processes so that the organization can see really what the clients are experiencing, whether it's hopefully not just counting complaints, but also to measure success stories and features of the organization that people value. The profitability and viability of the business is obviously really important if you are a business, or in fact the achievement of targets if you're a non-profit, public sector, and so on. The 7th element is continuous improvement. the culture of an organisation is one that wants to continue to be successful, but to grow on its risk knowledge, to understand the information on risk that's coming out of its management information, developing a risk radar, understanding emerging risks and the changing business environment that the organisation faces. And through all of these processes, the organisation culture develops so you can really demonstrate value in your activities and your continuous improvement, and you have a very strong risk culture that's well communicated in the organisation.
Perfect, thank you, Mark. So that's a bit of a flying trip through the sort of main content and theory of the tool and how it's sort of broken down into those 7 key areas. I'd now like to spend a few minutes, led by Debbie, on sort of how can people actually use the tool? How do they get in? How do they log in? Who should be logging in? And how do they start to answer those questions themselves?
Yeah, right, okay, so we start with the request process, which is on the Airmic website, and there's a very simple little form there. You just need sort of 5 or 6 bits of information, and this will help us to raise the request and send you access to the QRisk delivery tool. Now, the Risk Culture Profiling Tool, it's an online questionnaire, if you like, and it's delivered through QRisk, which is QBE's software platform. So that's something to bear in mind. There's a little intro there from Airmic. I'd say, some people are wary about filling in this sort of information, but the only reason we need an email address is send the invitation, and it is also your username for the system. Industry sector is important because we need that when we get on later to developing the benchmarking information for you. We need to know what sector you're in. And it's not showing on here because this is just a snippet, but further down it asks whether you're already a QBE policyholder or not. And that's really for us because if you are, it's possible you've already got a QRisk access already set up, and we can just remind you of that rather than sending you a new password and so on. So that's a very quick request process, and those details are then flipped over to us by Airmic. Okay. So from there, depending on who's requested the tool, is going to very much be governed by how you're planning to use it. Now, there's several ways, and it's quite flexible. So to start with, it may be that somebody senior or responsible for risk within the organisation wants to do an assessment in the first instance. And this is just to see, is it appropriate? Are we going to get value out of this? Is it the right thing for us to do at this point of time? Because there will be other things on your risk management agenda, and you may feel that you've got other fish to fry before you go and take this step. But I think it's a useful starting point for anybody is to look at it as an individual process. So you could do that first. What we recommend, though, is that the exercise is completed as a group, because in doing so, and that could be, say, a partnership group, a management board, a risk committee, or maybe even a special working group that you've pulled together just for this exercise if you want to do it that way. So it could be a range of people. But the point of doing it in a group is that you're going to get extra value from it, we think, because the debate that's created in just having the conversation is one of the added value features of it, we feel. And if you only get one person's viewpoint, it's going to be a blinkered viewpoint from their own standpoint. So it's good to have challenge and opposition and debate and discussion before you decide how we're going to evaluate ourselves on that particular point. So that we recommend is the best way to do it. So as a starting point, that's ideal. If you feel that this is going to be valuable for you in terms of a comparison tool, you can also use risk culture profiling to compare different locations. So that could be offices within the UK or abroad, or satellites and so on, where you might just say get a manager or somebody in charge of that office to compare, and then you can compare and contrast. Or you can compare perceptions at different levels within the organisation. So you might want to compare, say, senior management to mid-tier management to the troops on the ground, if you like, and then see if the views of those are differing as well. So there's a couple of interesting ways to do it. If you want to do it that way, we would ask that you get in touch with us so we can, the original request page basically get one request and you'll get one invitation. Yes. But if you want to do more, then if you can give us an idea of the plan that you've got in terms of how many locations or levels, then if you let us know, we can send you invitations and we can label them accordingly. Whereas if you just try to do it on QRisk yourself, you will just get the same name and you'll have trouble comparing results then. So if you let us know what the outline plan is, we can help you and work with you to do those invitations and make sure they're called different locations or whatever. Otherwise it can be a bit confusing when you come to look at the results. So that's an idea of how you might want to use it, but we'd recommend to start with a group approach. So you've got different views and you're looking at the organisation as a whole. Okay. And certainly the other steps are another step onwards if you want to do it that way. Yes. Okay. So, as I say, once we've got the information from Airmic, you will be sent an invitation to access the tool from, as I say, it's from a system called QRisk, and it's an automated email. So you won't be able to read all that writing because it's tiny, but the reason I put it up there was basically so you'd recognise it when you see it, yeah. Hopefully. The problem is, because it's automated, sometimes we find it goes into people's spam folder. Yeah. So if you're expecting it, all I'd say is look out for it. If it doesn't come into your inbox, it might have been spammed because it is an automated email. And I suppose the key things to look at there are sort of halfway down. You've got access to the Risk Culture Profiling tool. That's a hyperlink. That will take you straight through. So there's no messing about. All you have to do is click on that link. And you've also got your username and password. As I say, username is generally your email address, so that's easy for you to remember. What won't be so easy is the password, because
that does look complicated.
Yeah, well, I made that one up specially just to make it look complicated. So don't try putting that one in and thinking you're going to log into something because it won't work. But that's basically what it is. It's completely random digits, so it's best to copy and paste that across. So I would say is if you flip on to the next screen, so as soon as you've clicked on Risk Culture Profiling Tool, you'll be presented with the little login box on the left. So you just pop in your username and you copy and paste the password across and log in. It's as simple as that, and it will take you into the tool. If you have any difficulties, we have got a support tab there. You shouldn't have, but I've just got some contact details there. So you've got support@QRisk to use as an email address. You've got a contact phone number. Now this is the QBE help desk itself, and so we've got clients using it, we've got internal people using it as well. So you just need to say that you need, maybe it's a password issue, that you're having trouble with QRisk, your client and so on. So you just give them the username and they'll sort you out. One other feature to notice here is, because it is a very strange password to remember, you probably want to update it straight away. Yes. And I would say if you just hover over the welcome name at the top, if you hover over that, it will give you the option to change your password to something that's memorable, and then I suggest you save that somewhere. Otherwise, yeah. And save the email as well. Save it somewhere safe, and then you'll remember. But as I say, if you get stuck and you can't remember your password, there's always the help desk to fall back to, or support.QRisk. So there are sources of support there. Okay. Hopefully you won't need to use that. We haven't had any issues with that so far anyway, so that's good. Okay, so as I say, if you click on the Risk Culture Profiling Tool, log in your details, it will take you straight to the Risk Culture Profiling Tool itself, which is the next item on the screen. And I'm just going to run through some of the features that are there. So down the left-hand side, you've got all the sections. So we mentioned the 7 drivers. So as you'd expect, there are 7 sections. And the section you're working in will be in bold, and leadership is highlighted there. So that's the first section. If you're in the leadership section, that will be highlighted in bold. Once you've completed that section, a little tick will appear in the left-hand column. So you know if you've completed everything, because if you haven't got 7 ticks, you haven't completed it and something's missing. It's quite simple, quite basic. Okay, so really it's just a case of working through. Now, if we look to the question itself, so they are the sections. If we look to the question itself, two things I want to highlight here. Firstly is that in the guidance you've got lots of indicators and behaviours that are there to give you a flavour of how you might evaluate this particular element of the tool. It doesn't mean that they are all mandatory requirements and they are not linked to the answer mathematically. We just, in this particular instance, we've got 8 bullets, but you know, some questions have got 5, some questions might have 9. It's just random, and we put them there so you're not scratching your heads and thinking, what on earth does that mean? You know, they're there as a flavour, and the reason we put might in is because you could be doing, say, 3 or 4 of those. You could be doing half a dozen or so other completely different things that we didn't put on the list, but we could have, you know, every question, it would just get awful if there were 20 bullets. And some people will read all the bullets and think they've got to do all of those, but that's not the case at all. So and then your evaluation, if you like, it's a little, the next point that's highlighted in yellow is just a drop down menu, and you have a choice from 1 to 7. So that's the levels of evaluation you can give yourself. And as I say, it's not a mathematical formula. You don't have to stress about working things out. Ratings are scales 1 to 7. 1 is just kind of little activity in this area, and 7 is if you feel it's fully embedded. So
it's a self-assessment, and you use these as indicators on, you know, well, we're doing some of this, we're actually also doing X, Y, and Z, so I'd say that we are 6 out of 7. Or something
and you
like
might also think, I know there's at least a couple of things that we're planning to do, or we want to do, but we haven't got there yet, and so on. So it's really how you just evaluate yourself generally, and it's not anything to get bogged down in terms of numbers and analysis. So nothing there. And then 3 other things I just want to highlight on there. You've got a print option, a save option, and a next section. Now the print, if you want to, for instance, you can print and download a blank version of this if you wanted. So if you are going to sit round a table in a group and chat about it, and you want to scribble notes all over it, and you want to give people a copy of it beforehand, you can just download it, save it, and circulate it to the people in that group, and you can sit there and scribble notes on it as you have your debate, and then bring that all together into one evaluation before you do your online submission. You can save it because you don't have to do this all in one go. If you find like, okay, well, let's do this over a lunch break, and you only manage to get through, and it takes a lot longer than you expect it's going to take, because if you're having that debate and that discussion properly, you know, it might take slightly longer. There is a time investment. You might say get through 3 or 4 sections, and you might want to go back to it next week and do, you know, the next few sections. So you can save it and go back to it later. You don't have to do it all in one sitting, and then you can just use the next section to go forwards, and there's a back section on the next page and so on. So that's some features to understand on there.
So you work through all of those? Absolutely.
So you've got, as I say, you've got 7 sections reflected in the 7 drivers, and there's 31 evaluations in total. So finally you'll get to the final section, which is continuous improvement, and by then the last thing I wanted to point out is that at the end of every section you've got an open text. So all of the questions are evaluations of 1 to 7, except at the end of each section you've got an option to capture thoughts at the time, because if you want to download a report to say where you are, you want to maybe put your thoughts in at the time, you want to go back and visit it later, and you can maybe just think about it in terms of, okay, what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, what opportunities have we got, and what are the threats if we don't do this particular thing? Is there a threat even? So you could use that sort of SWOT as a way to capture your ideas. It's just a way to capture where are we now, what do we want to do, what are our actions?
Okay, great. Okay, so just to be aware, in the interest of time, we'll quickly move on. We might go a few minutes over today. Obviously, if you don't have the time to listen in for the whole thing, we will. You can listen to it all online.
And then the final button is submit. And you
okay.
Okay.
Sorry, Debbie.
That's all right. No.
Okay, so you have spent the time to fill in that form with your group of people, or the sort of multiple groups of people. What happens next? What do you get out of it?
Okay, well, as I say, immediately you can print your results out of QRisk, and this is just a snapshot, an example of one evaluation and one of the open text boxes. So that is basically QRisk report snapshot at this point in time. So if you want to go back in 12, 18 months, 2 years time and repeat the exercise, you've got something to compare it to. So that's a sort of self-service report, if you like. Then we come on to the benchmarking report.
Yes.
And this is a screenshot of sort of results highlights. So once we've got enough data from the Airmic members, we'll be able to produce this for those who participated. And then what you've got there is a summary of all the sections, your own rating compared to Airmic members, and any sectors. So obviously it's going to depend on the numbers that we've got.
Yes, this is a good point, because I know this is something that's really of interest to members, but the benefit of this piece is going to come out as more and more of our members start to fill this in. If we've only got 3 people filling it in, it's not going to be the best benchmark report, but I think we've had 40 people register for the tool so far, so if they all start to use it and more people dial in and get involved, hopefully these benchmarking reports will get fuller and fuller.
Yeah. So the benchmarking report is for later, and then you've got your highlights there, and then it's just broken down into the individual sections.
Got you.
Yeah, which are all colour-coded. Yeah, okay, so you've got those.
Okay, so that is the tool in essence. So as I said, it does take a while to complete, but I know that there's a lot of benefit to Airmic members. Debbie, can you just quickly run through those benefits, and then we'll start to think about how people are actually using this tool already?
Yeah, so to summarise then, you've got the comprehensive framework now, so you're not going to your risk culture discussion with a blank sheet of paper, basically. You've got something there and it's comprehensive. It's going to support that discussion within your group and encourage the debate. And as we've described, it's quite flexible in the way you use it, or you might want to use it in future. The report, I think, and the fact that you're doing this will demonstrate that you do have a drive for improvement. You're not just resting on your laurels. You can show your stakeholders that you are trying to push on your risk management agenda. If it's your aim to go for a risk management standard, it will support you in that. And as I say, you've got these reports which will give you the qualitative, quantitative and benchmarking data that you might want out of an exercise like this.
Perfect. Okay, and then I know that you guys at QBE haven't just stopped as the tool being produced as it is. We've actually had a question come through saying, can the wider special request options be available in the future? I know, Debbie, you're going to talk about some of the plans from QBE to develop this tool further. Maybe you can touch on that then.
Yeah, so we've mentioned benchmarking, and the quality of that will be down to basically the numbers that we get. So we can benchmark people against one other person if that's the only one available, but it won't be that valuable. So the more the better.
Yeah.
I think once we've got that, we've got a little bit of data already from outside of the Airmic group, from QBE policyholders. So we've got some understanding what the areas of challenge are, where the stronger areas are, and we hope to talk about that at the Airmic conference on the Wednesday morning session. As a result of that, we hope to be able to produce sort of insights articles, how you might address those challenges in more practical ways.
Brilliant.
And ideally, we're going to develop some case studies on how people have used the tool, and then Airmic members can look at that, and hopefully that will give them some inspiration, if you like.
Well, talking of case studies, I'm going to hand over to Mark now, who has been working with some organisations actually using the tool to improve their risk culture. So can you map out what you've done?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is a great case study. It's a professional services business in the construction industry, pretty large in the UK and overseas. And this is one of these special working groups that Deborah mentioned, and it's as if like a special request approach to the tool. It was a terrific team project led by the QBE point of contact on the risk side in the firm. And through that avenue, we were able to engage the chief executive, other directors, and also in this organisation they had a branch network and a divisional business as well. And so it's really important to be able to understand the perceptions of risk and risk culture in the divisions, if you will, and in the branches, perhaps versus the head office. So we undertook a lot of work using the tool with the directors and other senior managers. to try and identify areas where risk and quality improvements might be made, to understand whether there are differences between those entities that I mentioned, divisions, etc. Each senior person that we interviewed committed the time required. I want to make this real clear that we've touched on it a couple of times before. It's not a quick online questionnaire to complete. It can be done in different stages, as Deborah mentioned. It can be printed and used as a paper questionnaire. I used that a couple of times, and that was really good, including with more than one person present, and we had various debates about the indicators, the guidance and behavioral indicators that characterize good communication, good client surveys and so on. So the output was a comprehensive risk culture profiling report, a document, looked at the business's strengths, and I should say here that you need sometimes independent affirmation of what you're doing well, so you carry on doing it well, or perhaps build on that. There were some differences actually between locations, between the head office and some of the guys in the other branches, and that was interesting for the firm to see. The report is anonymized. It's unattributed. Statements are unattributed. So it's an independent document that everybody can look at and get around the board table to discuss. The benefits here were very specific to the organisation. We do echo those that Deborah was saying. The strength shared amongst the management, giving that affirmation of good practice, and it's very motivational to the individuals that we met, and increases this visibility and understanding areas of potential improvement. There was immediate adoption of some risk assessments activities, other changes perhaps a little bit more longer term. There's a clear and comprehensive development plan that was brought into by the management, and it's really helped to set the agenda for improving the risk culture. And from this project, I would say finally on the case study that one of the things they were shy of, let's say, is actually asking their clients for feedback on the quality of the services they provide, typically at the end of a project, and they're now thinking whether in fact a good risk culture will be able to say, yeah, please give us honest feedback so that we can focus on our continuous improvement. So it's a great project for these guys. They were really happy with it.
And they recognised it at a senior level then?
Definitely.
And there was output and benefit at that level.
There are two things that are critical. They recognise it at senior level, and they recognise the significance of it to the group's corporate governance, and it's an important tool, platform for them going forward.
Perfect. Well, thank you both for mapping out how this tool can be used, both in terms of technically using the tool online and the benefits of it to the organisation. So that's it in terms of our two-part webinar series on risk culture. But that's not it for Airmic members to do. I'd say the three key things really are: register for the tool, take a look at it, understand that, yeah, this is a commitment, but there is benefit at all levels to the organisation. 2, use the tool, because the more people who use it, the more benefit there is for the other users, as we can get some really nice benchmarking material and new insights on how we can develop more positive cultures. And finally, attend our seminar on the 14th of June, the morning of our Airmic conference in Birmingham. We are going to be running a seminar which is going to look at those insights that Deborah mentioned earlier. What are people finding are the biggest challenges in terms of developing a positive risk culture, and how are they addressing those challenges? So that's it for now. Thank you for everybody who dialed in, and hopefully see you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.